Hello, welcome to the latest in this Ebsta series of webinars. Today we have Global Sales Director at Ebsta, Adam Roberts. Adam has been an authority in the discipline and successful practice of go-to-market and especially sales functions for 20 years and right at the heart of SaaS for the last 10. My name's Mark Choueke. I am a journalist, an author of B2B marketing text book, Boring to Brave, and the Chief Creative Partner at OrbitalX. Adam, it's really lovely to have you here. We've got a lot to get through, but it's going to be an exciting session.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mark. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about this today. I think stage gating's, it's not a new topic. It's not a fun topic. It'll be a topic that is probably discussed across, many boardrooms between many RevOps leaders, many sales leaders. But hopefully, what we can do today is really shine a light on how to do it well, right? Why it's important, what happens when you do it well, and hopefully add a ton of value to whoever's listening.
So before we get into it, before we go there, and you can open our eyes to stage gating, though not new, it's something I'm new to, and I've enjoyed hearing and learning since we've been talking about it. Tell me what the problem uh, what the problem in modern sales functions is there that you're trying to solve. You've through your work with Ebsta, because of who you work with and what you're able to do, and the data you have, you've been talking about some genuine fault lines within otherwise supposedly well-functioning sales organizations, some genuine cracks that are preventing us from doing our most effective and efficient work. Talk me through what the problems are that are there to solve as you see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, let me jump in here and share my screen. One of my least favorite things to do is bore people with PowerPoint. So hopefully there won't be too many slides today, but the problem that we see in the market, and for anybody that is familiar with Ebsta, that knows Ebsta, will have heard of our benchmark report.
Hmm.
Our benchmark report is a report that's done every year. We analyze $48 billion worth of pipeline from 365 companies. We interviewed 2,000 CROs, and the real key statistics that we pulled out, and that have been an ongoing trend over the last few years that we've been doing this report, is that nearly 1 in 5 reps are missing quota. 78%
Really,
of
one in five.
sellers didn't hit quota. Yeah, 1 in 5. 1 in 5 is hitting quota. 4 out of 5 are not. There's this huge delta in velocity, and sales velocity is a way of measuring, performance across, multiple segments. But the delta in that sales velocity between top and bottom performers is 11x. That's up from 8.9x last year, and 36% of deals are slipping. 36% of deals are slipping. And what that tells us is that there's this huge amount of inconsistency in performance. And if we dive a layer deeper into that, again, another slide from our benchmark report, 14% of sellers are driving 80% of the revenue. And when we look at that at a deeper level, exactly what our top performers are doing, we start to see these inconsistencies and what's driving this delta in velocity. We can see that our A players are 55% better at discovery skills. We can see that our A players are 70%. Our B players are 76% more likely or less likely to have critical events on their opportunities. And our A players are better at maintaining relationships. They are multi-threading more effectively. They have more relationships. And kind of the most important thing is that they're identifying and maintaining and building relationships with the C-suite. And so Ebsta helps businesses understand this really kind of granular level of data. But what that means when it comes to stage gating is that if you know that you need to engage with a certain persona or a certain number of stakeholders within the businesses that you're targeting in order to close win an opportunity, by stage gating your pipeline, what you can do is help elevate your B and your C sellers, drive up the performance, but and control your pipeline, reduce the risk, increase the health of the pipeline by demanding that all of our sellers try and achieve these goals. And so it's
Have you
really,
tell me this before we go into stage gating? You've got a lot of CROs and a lot of revenue ops and a lot of sales directors on this call, and they'll be looking at these figures at the same as I am. And you've got like A players multiple times better at discovery, multiple times better at building relationships over time. What are the factors here that prevent sales organizations from being more consistent? Is it the type of training? Is it sort of process? Or is it more about just we have to be okay with the fact that some individuals are going to have skills? Like I don't understand why if you've got A players, you automatically have B players. Why don't how are sales leaders not able to use those A players to translate their skills and sort of show best practice?
yeah, really good question. Love that question. Um, the fundamental thing that we see across every business that we work with is a gap in the data. They either don't understand the data or don't have the data because it's sat in silos in disparate systems and disparate places, um, or they're not able to understand that in the context of what it means across multiple different segments or multiple
Hmm.
different verticals that they're working in. So I think that's the consistent problem that every business is facing at this precise moment in time. It's really that underlying fundamental, it's a tale as old as time that sellers, are notoriously poor at entering contact and activity information into Salesforce. It's not a high value activity for them. They don't see the immediate need, and it's sort of the thing that happens at the end of the week was you're kind of doing your admin, and it's the first thing that you miss because you've got other perceived higher priority values in. So, one of the first things that, Ebsta does is to fix all that in the background, which is really useful. But ultimately, once you have that data, you can use that to then start to really understand and build a blueprint for success, which is, many companies have access to lots of data, but it's having it in a single space, in a single place inside, what should be the single source of truth Salesforce, and
Yeah.
then managing individuals to that.
Excellent. Okay, so it's sometimes not enough data. It's sometimes having the data, but in
Yeah.
the wrong places, and it's sometimes having the data in the right place, but not being able to use it to its full optimum.
Yeah, exactly. And look, you also mentioned there the skills gap, right? That's another thing that we talk about in our benchmark report. There is this huge, the most significant gap between our B and our C sellers is in the skill of selling. And there's a whole other webinar that we could do on that, and I'll try and stay clear from that today. This is more about, how can we put some guardrails around our pipeline so that we make sure that it's as healthy and as robust as it can possibly be, that we drive consistency across our team through those data points. But you're absolutely right. There is a whole other arm of this, which is, my A players or my A sellers are much better at qualification. They're much better at, driving urgency, uncovering problems, navigating the deal. They are important. They are mission critical, but there's a whole separate thread as well that we could talk about. So
So
I'll
drag me
park that
back
there.
to stage gating. Let's go, let's
Stage
carry on
gating.
with the let's make sure that this is the most valuable session possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I'm going to dive back in and share my screen again.
Perfect.
Um, so some of the things that Ebsta can do, right? Everyone's familiar with the benchmark report.
Yeah.
We publish that live every year. We also have revenue insights reports, and any business can come to Ebsta and purchase one of these revenue insights reports, and they're full of absolute gold. And what we do is we bring all of the data sets together from across disparate sources. We bring them into a single data lake, and we analyze all of those data points against every opportunity to really build out a blueprint of what success looks like for your business, right? And
Hmm.
that and success, one of the pitfalls to stage gating that we see across all of the conversations that we have is that businesses aren't thinking granular enough when it comes to stage gating. You know, You're looking at a slide here, Mark. It says, how multi-threading impacts win rates and deal velocity. And we can see here that when, in this particular case, when 8 or more stakeholders are involved, win rate increased by 256%. Now, businesses are going to see very different results, whether they're selling commercial, mid-market, or enterprise. And it's not that it takes eight stakeholders for my business. We need to start thinking about, well, okay, in enterprise, it might take 8 stakeholders, but in commercial, it might take six. Commercial, it might take three. In mid-market, it might take 6 stakeholders. So the granularity that Ebsta is able to go to, because we capture and fix all that data in historically, is a really, really important thing. But all of a sudden, we've got a data point here that now we know that when we have 8 stakeholders on an opportunity, it increases our win rate by 2.5 times. I can start to stage gate my pipeline so that this isn't going to become a stage 4 or stage 5 opportunity unless we've got at least 6 stakeholders on an opportunity. And that is really meaningful. The other thing that I think this, having the information displayed like this does, Mark, is it allows everybody in an organization to buy in to why we're doing this.
Yeah.
I've seen in the past, and we've worked with customers where, someone in RevOps or someone in sales leadership has been saying, we need to stage gate our pipeline. We need to stage gate our pipeline. We need to do X. We need to do Y. We need to do Z. And it falls on deaf ears. But when you have a chart that explicitly shows this is what happens to our win rate when we get this amount of stakeholders on an opportunity, this is what happens to our win rate, all of a sudden the penny drops. Everybody in the organization can buy into it. Leadership go, great, I get this. Why haven't we done this sooner? And all of a sudden
So
you've got, gone.
So sorry, Adam. So multi-threading is having an understanding of the different stakeholders you need to have engaged in a conversation with their different needs and their different motivations. And we've talked about now multi-threading impacts on stage gating. We've talked about some of the problems we're trying to solve. Are you ready at this point? Is it worth giving our listeners a very, very clear take on what is meant by stage gating for those that haven't done it?
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, very good point. So look, what do we mean by stage gating? Is that there must be a number of buyer verifiable outcomes that you have set in stone inside your CRM. That means a seller cannot move an opportunity from stage 1 to stage 2 without meeting a certain set of criteria. Right?
That makes sense.
That's the definition. We probably should have covered that off before we started to dive in here. But one of those buyer verifiable outcomes is, look, we need to have the buying committee engaged. And in this case, if our buying committee is 8 stakeholders, we're going to have a much better result. So by stage 2, I want at least 3 stakeholders engaged. By stage 3, I want 4, ideally 5. And by the time we're submitting a business proposal, we need to have between 6 and 8. And if we can get 8, then amazing. That's my golden ticket. And that's just one example of the buyer verifiable outcome. And once you capture the data this way, we also start to understand, because we're getting the data directly from source, from the email server, we get to understand things like job titles. We're scraping signatures. We're looking at who is in that committee. And all of a sudden, not only do you have now, you've set a directive for your reps and your sellers to make sure that they're engaging with enough people. We're now actually identifying which ones are the most important ones that they need to target. And so you can see here is that, look, what's driving what's having the biggest impact on accelerating sales velocity for this business is the C-suite in finance and the C-suite in RevOps. And if these 2 people aren't engaged, this shouldn't be moving out of stage 4. And so look, these are gates and triggers that you can put into Salesforce. Salesforce understands the contacts, it understands who you're engaging with. Like, Ebsta can do some of this for you, but anybody can do this. You don't need to use Ebsta, but really trying to understand the specific stakeholders that are involved and trying to drive those behaviors unilaterally across your teams is going to have a huge impact on driving predictability and consistency in the pipeline.
So I can see why this data is super important and super useful to any sales function. You'd think that by having this data, um, underperformance can almost be eradicated or certainly reduced significantly very, very quickly. Give me a sense of all the different data points that you have, of all the different clients that come across you, both currently with Ebsta and in the past, and all those different sales methodologies and functions that you've been personally witness to. I'd love to draw a correlation between, you said 78% of sales reps are missing quota. I wonder if we can draw a correlation between that kind of underperformance and the number of or percentage of organizations that don't do stage gating well. For me, from what you said, stage gating just feels like having all the correct information to understand your perfect optimum sales journey. So, roughly, if you could put a sort of finger in the air benchmark type number on it, what percentage of sales functions do you come across broadly that just simply don't do stage gating well? Is it 40, 50%? Is it 60% or 70%?
I think there's lots of organizations that are doing it. I see very, very, very few that are doing it well. And
Really?
yeah, so a lot of the things that we see when when stage gating is apparent is that all of this information sits in silos, it sits in dashboards, it's rarely used, it's not addressed in sales meetings, it's not addressed on a weekly cadence. RevOps have spent time, weeks if not months trying to pull all this data together. Um,
Mm.
and it's out of date by the time it's being used and being implemented. And so, what organizations need to think about is, yes, putting the stage gates and the triggers in place so that they can try and manage their pipeline across, 50, 100, 200 sellers more consistently. They really need to think about the process with which they use the data points to then drive the behavior and the consistency in um, in their day to day and the rhythm of their business to get the outcomes. Because if I'm a seller and I know that my manager is going to turn up every week and he's going to interrogate my pipeline, he's going to interrogate my deals, he's not going to ask me, Mark, what's happening with this deal. He's not going to ask me, when's that going to close, and I'm going to feed him, a load of narrative about, yeah, there's definitely going to come in. This is, I had a good meeting with them last week. They're going to buy. You're not having conversations like that anymore. When you do this properly and you get this right, the sales manager has all this information on this deal. I can see you're not engaged with the CFO, right? That's
So
a
do you do,
risk.
do you given this data that can come through a relationship with an organization like Ebsta, is there also an element of um, responsibility for training leaders up in using it and making sure it sort of falls into their daily checks with their reps? Is there a sort of a coaching and training element to using it?
Yeah, yeah, look, absolutely, absolutely. Look, what our from Ebsta's standpoint, our data capture um, piece is one part of the puzzle. We provide this data, we provide these insights. We also provide a platform. The platform is there to align everybody in the business to these data points. And then the final piece of the puzzle is that process. And one of the things that I think many technology businesses have missed over the last decade is actually aligning people, process, and technology. Because when you do all that's when the magic happens. It's when you get the real
Mm.
transformation. You get everybody working towards a common goal. Everybody's got access to all the insights, and the business process is aligned to everybody interrogating the data and interrogating the stage gates in unison on a weekly cadence. And that's where we see these huge dramatic increases in results.
Excellent. So that was personas. What's next?
So
For example, go on.
here we go. So Look, how qualified, we all know qualification methodologies are hugely important when it comes to in sales. For Ebsta, medpic is our gold standard, but we operate with companies that are using SPIM, with BAM, that have their own custom methodologies. And we really see across all of our data points that when qualification is high, your win rates go up
Yeah.
dramatically, right? So again, if we know what an average medpic score might be, um, and we're scoring medpic, we can start to stage gate the pipeline. So you don't have, from a sales leadership point of view, you have gates and triggers in your pipeline that that if an opportunity is in stage 5, we understand the paper process, we understand the decision criteria, we have validated that we are the vendor of choice and that the competition is no longer there. We've implicated the pain. We know that the metrics line up. If we know all those things, I can confidently say as a leader um, that this is a deal that's going to come in, and it's going to come in because we've done all of the due diligence and the qualification around the opportunity. But when you score medpic and you know that that's the case, you know you put those stage gates in the pipeline. You have a lot more inherent trust in the forecast, in the deals and the health of the pipeline, and you're managing your reps at scale towards driving these qualification and these outcomes. So again, it's just another data point, another example of where using very simple qualification scoring. This is medpic. Andy White scores it 1 to 4. All this information is out there in the marketplace. Doesn't have to be Ebsta per se, but if you know what qualification means to your business, you should be stage gating it in your pipeline.
Yeah. Amazing. And scoring is something that you've said previously when we've talked is also rare.
Yeah, it is. It is. We see a lot of medpic is done by notes. We believe it should be scored. We actually, part of the Ebsta platform is automatically scoring the conversations that we're having through Zoom, Teams, Gong, whatever call
Yeah.
intelligence tool that you use. We will actually automatically score it using AI ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, it's something that makes it easier for businesses to do, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be scoring or shouldn't have the ability to score medpic, inside Salesforce and do this yourself.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
So look, there's a few examples there of some of the data points, some of the things that we believe that are critical when it comes to stage gating a pipeline, some of the data points that will have the most impact when it comes to stage gating. So what
You
impact have we had? I think it's probably
This is a case that this is a real case study, right, that you're showing me now.
yeah, absolutely. So we've anonymized it for the purposes of client confidentiality, but this is a live case study, and we had a huge impact, transformational impact here with this business, and Ebsta went live in Q1 FY24. They used our data and our insights. They built their benchmarks. They built the stage gates. We evolved their process so that they were using the data points and interrogating their pipeline to those data points on a kind of a weekly cadence. And we saw this huge uptick in just 3 quarters, and we delivered this 16x increase in revenue velocity. And
So
we
you start in Q1, and by Q3 things really start to take off. So those
yeah.
the first 2 quarters are set up and establishing the functional practice and getting it together and making sure the team knows what's going on. You can say that within what looks like 6 months, you could have a sales uplift that equates to something like 16x.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
The it's been hugely transformational, and a lot of the work. Look, it takes time to embed process. It takes a little bit of time for new deals to come through and flow through, and depending on the this average sales cycle of a business, we might see improvements sooner, we might see them a little bit later. But look, there's no doubt you started to get value from doing this kind of thing within the first quarter.
That's
But
rapid, though. I mean, you say it takes time to establish process. For an ongoing pipeline with reps, all having done their own thing and presenting their own ways and running their own processes, and director trying to keep a hold of everything. That's a lot. I mean, I would have expected it to have taken a year or something to see that kind of uplift. That's a rapid change. Is that typical of what can happen when an organisation takes on this kind of discipline?
yeah, it absolutely is. And look, from our point of view, Ebsta's light touch to implement, right? We have a brand guarantee. We guarantee to get you implemented inside 30 days. It's light lift. It's easy to implement. It takes a little bit of time to train and enable people and get the key. I'm sure you're familiar with the analogy, Mark, but when you bend a ruler and you put stress on a ruler, it breaks in the middle. And it's that
Yes.
that management layer is is the hardest bit to get right. They're the
Yes.
key to driving adoption of all of the initiatives that you put into your business, right? They need to turn up week in, week out, using the data to manage their teams to the data. And if they do that, and in this case they did, then you can drive this transformational change.
And how
And
many
look,
reps did this case study have? What was the size of what was
these
the
these
size of the
guys are
team?
these guys are doing 130 million in ARR. They've got 80 sellers
Wow.
across three
Wow.
geographies. Um,
Okay.
and look, yes, look, we increase win rates. We increase win rates massively. We reduced the sales cycle. They had this huge ARR growth. But look, you can also see down at the bottom here, multi-threading increased by a third. All of
Hmm.
a sudden, everybody in the organization is bought in to multi-threading being important to drive incremental win rates. And we know that our sellers want to win. Every seller is in the business to win. No one likes to continuously lose. Um, but it's amazing when you get this right, when you have you know the right data, the right stage gating, and the right understanding and the communication pattern across a go-to-market organization. You can really change behavior and drive the right types of activities and the right cadence and much better consistency.
I mean, as an advocate and an evangelist of sales discipline and behaviors and eradicating what is often self-sabotaging practice, I know that you're often careful to say, listen, it doesn't have to be Ebsta. This is not about Ebsta or not Ebsta. This is just about doing all the right things. It so happens that these are what we're looking at here are Ebsta results, but you're more about evangelizing great sales practice, the data, the use of data, the alignment among reps, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I guess look, one of the key takeaways here is that if you might not be in the market for a tool like Ebsta, but you wanted to kind of get the benefit from stage gating a pipeline, there's a quick checklist here of some things that you can do. First and foremost, you need to pull all your kind of last 12 months close won, close lost data. And that needs to be
Mm.
segmented. One of the pitfalls that we see a lot of businesses make is that they blanket stage gating across segments, geographies, industries, and it doesn't work. You need to get granular with your data. Um, those stage age medians are really important. Slip to lose ratios are really important. Those you know really kind of focus on kind of four key outcomes, buyer verifiable outcomes per stage, whether that be a qualification, whether that be a number of stakeholders, the right stakeholder. We gave you some examples here today. Make sure those you've got the required CRM fields. I'd always recommend that you pilot this within a region, capture feedback, and before you roll out. I'm a big advert of crawl, walk, run in everything that you do. Um, you know, there needs to be an alignment of um, all of everybody in the organization to the stage gates, and there needs to be some sort of dashboard that everybody can look at on a weekly cadence. if you don't do that, if you don't have that rigor or don't bring the right people in, uh, don't look at this kind of information on a regular cadence, it will fall by the wayside. And finally, kind of the last thing is, look, make sure you're benchmarking quarterly. Things change, velocity, so some of the factors might change. All of this stuff is, you need to analyze it and kind of review it on a quarterly basis. Um, and so look, you don't need to stage gate anything that doesn't predict win rate. So there's a real there's some quick fire tips on what needs to happen. As part of this, anybody who's registered, anybody who's watching now is gonna automatically, as a follow up, get Ebsta's stage gating pipeline playbook. We've written a playbook. I think there's 9 sections to it. We'll make sure that everybody who's watching this or registered for this will get that playbook. And yeah, so look, hopefully there's been a ton of value here. We'd love to have a conversation about helping more businesses get more into the weeds with their data, and we've seen the impact that this can have. And yeah, like, hopefully it's been we've added a ton of value to the audience today.
Adam, I think that's been incredibly valuable. And my takeout is that, as somebody who is involved in quite deeply in go-to-market strategy, but comes from the marketing end, whenever I've had access to or participation in sales training days, it always feels a little bit to me like sales training is. It feels like the classic kind of building the plane while it's flying. Like, the market and the deals have to be ongoing whilst you're trying to change sales culture. And this, to me, what's incredible about the stories you've just told is that we're talking about almost what I see as a cultural reset of sales functions that aren't quite getting there and doing everything. It's culturally a reset on what data you use and how you house it and how you apply it. It's cultural reset on the rigor and the discipline of gating and staging absolutely every phase of a journey, and making sure you've got all those criteria in place, and putting it in a dashboard so everybody can refer to it and learn from one another and have a
Yeah.
sort of step-by-step guide. Now, if you're generally shifting culture in an organization that has strong personalities, especially, sometimes you're looking at a really, really long period of transition. What you're saying is that if we have the right fundamentals and the kind of hygiene checks in place, so you can put that data from the last 12 months or whatever, and regardless of sales model, regardless of size of team, if you can put these things in place, a cultural reset can be executed and commercially successful pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely what we're saying. It can be done at pace. You don't you the real difference maker, and I'm talking from an Ebster standpoint now, is the revenue insights. It's the ability to bring all of those data sets into one place and have contextually relevant insights from multiple disparate data sources that are presented in a way that everybody in the organization can buy into it. And when you get organizational buy-in, because we can irrefutably prove that do A is going to have B result on your win rate in your pipeline, every seller's like, yeah, that sounds great. Rather than me saying to my team, oh, you need to get more stakeholders on that opportunity. Why? Because the CRM won't let you move it otherwise. It's a very different sell,
Yeah.
right? It's a very different mechanism.
Yeah.
And so bringing all that insight into one place that everybody in the organization can access and is ongoing, right? The kind of quarterly reports, things will change, no doubt. Things will evolve. It's really, really powerful, and probably the single biggest differentiator from Ebster to any other player in the market.
Well, as ever, Adam, thank you for your time. I think the half hour we've given has delivered immense value for the CROs and sales directors that are on this call, and indeed those that will watch it on demand in future. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you again for the next one.
No worries. Thank you very much, Mark. I really enjoyed the conversation. Take care, everybody.